So there's basically four different creation accounts, or like four different creation models that exist. And I just wanted to briefly mention who tends to believe each of them, because sometimes that kind of helps us to understand it a little bit too. So the young earth creationism, like your literal 6 day, 6,000 years to 10,000 years ago, God made everything.
Right.
That tends to be your fundamentalist evangelical Protestants believe that. So
For the
that's
most
like
part,
that's like
yeah.
your Southern Baptists, your evangelical, non-denominational, D.L. Moody, Billy Graham type of like that's the tendency. And I'm stereotyping, but that's the tendency. Gap theory, what I have noticed, it came out in the Schofield Bible, and there was kind of a generation that believed that. But in today's Christianity, who tends to believe the gap theory are Pentecostals. And the reason why that tends to be, from my experience, is because there's the idea of, well, what would be the judgment that God would have done before this current creation? And the judgment would have been the fall of Satan. And Pentecostals like to emphasize Satan in the spiritual battle.
Yeah.
And so they kind of find like a niche in the gap theory to help explain a lot of that. The day-age theory is more like you put in the long periods of time, but instead of it being a gap at the beginning, it's the actual days of creation. I've noticed that tends to be the view of more the liturgical churches.
More on the liberal side.
Theistic evolution.
Well, theistic evolution and day age are slightly different. Day age is not really saying that there was ever an evolution between species. It's saying that there were different creation events that happened. Like each day is long periods of time, but you don't actually have Darwinian evolution.
Right.
And so that tends to be the belief I've noticed of like many Roman Catholics, many Lutherans, many Reformed Christians, they tend to believe that. And then theistic evolution, what that one is saying is, it's basically saying Genesis 1 is not to be taken literally. Because day agers are still trying to take it literally. They're just trying to say a day can mean something different.
Plugging in more time, and they've got their own set of troubles doing that. But
right.
Because without, plants would need to be fertilized, at least some of them. And if you're going to go couple million years between plants and bugs, you got a problem.
But a theistic evolutionist, what they're trying to say is the whole thing is not really literally true. There was evolution, and God used evolution to create things, and that tends to be your liberal. That tends to be like, because what that one is doing that the other three models are not doing is the other three models are still believing in a literal Adam and Eve, and that's how sin entered the world. And you can believe the Apostles' Creed, the basic statement of Christian faith, and hold either the day age, the gap, or the young earth creation. Theistic evolution is very difficult to hold the Apostles' Creed, because how do you have sin entering the world if you believe that there was not a literal Adam and Eve? Because theistic evolutionists don't believe in literal Adam and Eve.
Well, and the problem there too, which we've touched on earlier, is that mathematically evolution fails because there's not enough time for all the mutations.
Right.
And the Cambrian explosion, where all these fossils end up in a rock layer, you know.
Yeah, and there's no intermediate forms.
And there's not enough time for all of these to have occurred through mutation. So that's out.
I personally think that's the most damaging view that you can have of time, is to take the theistic evolution. Because to me, I just don't see where, to me, what in my mind, my picture of that is, why would I want to follow a designer that fails all the time and has to rework things on a regular basis to get them to work? And that's what evolution is. You have to have death, and you have to have this magic mutation thing to create everything. And I personally think that the theistic evolutionists just haven't looked at evolution very closely. I think they adopt it because maybe they've been through the school system, and they say, well, evolution's true, but I also believe in God, so I'm going to plug them together. I don't think they've looked at evolution very closely to see the major issues it has.
Scientifically, theologically, the whole thing.
Yeah, it doesn't really agree with either side completely.
And I would say
it doesn't really have the science on their side, and it doesn't have theology on their side either. It's kind of like the Christian Science Monitor that Ed makes fun of all the time. It's not Christian and it's not science.
and I would say theistic evolution, it's definitely a position that a person could hold, but not really as a Christian. Like, let's say if you're a deist, if you
Uh-huh.
believe in God but you're not sure what revelation there is, or if there is a revelation, it's just a belief in an abstract God. Theistic evolution makes a lot of sense. That
But
God,
not scientifically.
but it does
Yeah.
not scientifically make
It
sense.
will not hold up, and that's the thing that is not getting a lot of airplay. And even scientists who are not believers are agreeing, this is critical, that there isn't enough time, there never will be enough time for the 8.6 million species that are on the planet, let alone the ones that have already gone extinct.
Mhm. Just
There's
enough time.
never enough time in the history of time, of any time, way past 14 billion years,
Mhm.
where there's more zeros in that number than there are, particles in the universe. It's just, it's a number that you can't even calculate. It's so high.
It's beyond reasonable. It may be.
It's
You might be able-
impossible.
You maybe think it's possible. I personally don't. I don't think evolution is even possible. But let's assume that you say, well, it's possible. Like, Jay could be a man from Mars and only seeing the image here. Okay, that's possible. But do you have any proof for that?
It's possible, but it's not
Yeah,
probable.
It's not probable at all. And as we started off with J. Warner Wallace, what he's aiming at is he's aiming at beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think when you look at things the way that the Bible portrays them, they're true beyond a reasonable doubt.